Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone, depending on where you are. My name is Trene Hawkins. I'm a Wharton grad, just graduated this past May, and I'm excited to be your tour host for today's virtual campus tour. Um, I just would love to see, I have my chat box over here on my side screen, so I'd love for folks to go ahead and put into the chat where you're joining from and your name. I just love to hear who's in the audience today. Nice. So we have Kelly from New York. Let's get a few more folks in there. Scott in Dallas. Must be hot down there. Shiraz from New York. Amelia from Arlington. Love it, love it, love it. Flood it. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in. I know all of you who are joining today are considering Wharton's EMBA program. And as I mentioned, I'm a recent graduate from what we call the WEMBA program, and am so happy to be your host. I think we're all kind of in this uncertain and not very normal time. And as a recent grad, definitely feeling the effects of that, but also so happy to be leading you on this tour where kind of my memories and my experience with the WEMBA program are so fresh for me. So I'm going to spend about the first 10 or so minutes telling you a little bit about my experience, what brought me to Wharton, and my time in the program, with a little bit of a virtual tour so you can see some of the spaces that I spent a lot of my last 2 years in. And then I'm going to try to leave about the last 15 to 20 minutes to answer your questions. So feel free to enter your questions throughout, and I will try to get to as many as possible before the end of this virtual tour. So a little bit about me. As I mentioned, my name is Trene Hawkins from New Jersey. I'm a Jersey girl through and through, have always lived here, did my undergraduate studies here, still live in this state, about 10 minutes north of Trenton, 10 minutes east of Princeton. I studied molecular biology, cell and molecular biology as an undergraduate, and did a master's degree, and really spent the beginning of my professional and academic careers focused in the hard sciences, and really, I think, aiming toward a career in biomedical research and thinking about maybe a PhD or an MD PhD. And those experiences after my studies, my professional experiences after my studies, really had me spending most of my time in clinical diagnostic labs and academic labs, but always with a strong focus on health. And I really had a strong passion for health. In my time in my graduate studies, I got a chance to get some exposure to the School of Public Health at the university where I was studying, and really developed a strong passion for health, not only from a clinical perspective, but really thinking about population health and what health looked like in communities, and what we call in the health field social determinants of health. So all of the aspects of where we live, learn, work, and play, and how those impact our health. And so all of that led me to my current role, where I work in philanthropy at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. So RWJF is a large national health funder. We're the largest philanthropy in the United States, solely focused on health. And coming to philanthropy was really, I think, the thing that led me to the beginning of my Wharton journey. So how I came to Wharton: being in foundation world is very interesting, regardless of what foundation you're in or what the kind of topic focus is. It could be health, it could be education, it could be criminal justice. Really at the end of the day, the work of foundations is about the dollars that we move out the door in order to invest in social change. And so in my time in philanthropy, I really started to get interested in the role of capital in driving social change, and how big institutions like Robert Wood Johnson Foundation could think about its role in really being able to deploy capital in order to catalyze social change. So about 2.5 years into my time at RWJF, I started to have conversations with friends, with colleagues, mentors, just about what an MBA could offer. Because of my background in the hard sciences, I think unlike some of my classmates, for instance, who even if they hadn't studied business, were definitely I think working in functions and roles where they're more aligned with kind of business studies, whether it was accounting or operations. I really felt like a fish out of water. So I wasn't 100% sure that an MBA was right for me. But in the end, I think after doing some research, and especially after coming across Wharton's program, I really felt like it could be a special place for me. I think the things about Wharton's EMBA program in particular that appealed to me were first, the fact that I could continue to work full time. I came to philanthropy, as I mentioned, after several years of academic studies and several years of having already starting to pursue a professional career in the hard sciences. So I hadn't been in philanthropy for that long and wanted to continue to work if I were going to do additional studies. So I knew the WEMBA program would allow me to continue to work while also studying. Another big perk for me of the WEMBA program was the structure of the schedule. So as I would continue to work, knowing that I could kind of compartmentalize, have the time during the week for being able to devote that to my family life and kind of my professional life, but then being able to kind of come down to campus for the weekends and really dedicate 100% of my time to my studies. I think the third thing was really for the WEMBA program, in the WEMBA program, for someone like me who didn't have a background in business, whether finance or operations, I really felt like I was coming into a program that would give me the full MBA. A lot of EMBA programs are more abbreviated programs where you're not getting the full business school curriculum, the full MBA curriculum. And for me, I knew that if I really wanted to dig into this content in a way that would help me continue to build on the career that I'm building in philanthropy and in social impact and social investment practice, I really wanted to get that full exposure, that full degree. So I applied to the WEMBA program. I was one of the second round applicants. I was admitted and kind of kicked off my time at WEMBA in May of 2018. So now we'll launch into the virtual tour. And this is really just to give you a taste of what it's like on the Philadelphia campus. I'm going to go ahead and jump over to the tour screen. Beautiful 360 virtual tour on a beautiful sunny day in Philadelphia. So the first stop on our tour is Huntsman Hall. Huntsman Hall is where Penn's business school lives. It's where the Wharton School lives. And I think Huntsman Hall and the business school at Penn are just a really great place. They are really central to Penn's campus. I know a lot of universities, especially universities that are in cities, tend to be more sprawling. And so, if you're in the School of Medicine or the School of Law or the business school, you're not necessarily central to campus, but that's not the case with Huntsman Hall and the Wharton School. You really are right in the heart of Penn's campus. Huntsman Hall is where you spend so much of your time in classes. I'm spinning us around here so you can see Walnut Street. This is one of the main streets that runs through Philadelphia. I had many a Friday morning where I took the train down from Jersey into Philly's 30th Street station and was able to walk about 25-minute, 30-minute walk, 20-minute walk if you do a New York pace to campus. And so really accessible from mass transit, had a number of classmates who live nearby who would drive in and park in this big parking deck. And then come and drop our stuff and head to class in Huntsman Hall. So now we're going to go inside of Huntsman Hall. And this is to the lower level of Huntsman Hall, where a lot of students tend to gather. And so, I think as a WEMBA student, we're kind of there for 2 days. And in some ways, you just feel like you spend so much of your time on campus, and in other ways, you really don't get a lot of time to, I think, enjoy some of the different spaces on campus as some of the full-time students do. And yet you can see really beautiful space. The moments that we do get kind of in breaks in between classes, or even time with your study group or other folks in class to kind of use some of the space out here to kind of lounge. Sometimes for our classes, we may have a group exercise where we're doing breakouts and you come outside of class. So there are a couple of kind of large auditorium style classrooms here underneath here. And, you know, come out into these spaces and do some group exercises or sit here in between class. Just to kind of orient us a little bit up these stairs, there are some kind of breakout study rooms that students can reserve. I'll say as a WEMBA, summertime was at least my favorite time because there aren't a lot of undergraduate and full-time students on class, so it's a little bit easier to reserve study space. Up this escalator, there are kind of several floors up in Huntsman where we would have some of our classrooms, and I'll take you to some of those classrooms next. So here is one of the classroom spaces, and this is a place that I really learned to love during my time in WEMBA, which sounds probably ridiculous, but I say in all sincerity, we spend a lot of our time in classrooms. When you're in the WEMBA program, typical weekend is on a Friday. You have somewhere between 2 and 4 class blocks. Typically, you'll have a class block in the morning with an hour lunch in between, and a class block in the afternoon, both of those being 3 hours. And then once you start to get into later terms toward the end of your first year and into your elective year, you may have class blocks later in the day on Friday. So you spend a significant amount of time in these classrooms. You know, you can see it's kind of a semicircle or a U shape, really does foster deep engagement and conversation. Some of my favorite experiences in WEMBA really was with classmates in these classrooms, really learning a lot from them, learning as much from my classmates as we learned from our professors, being able to do different kind of interactive different activities in class, being able to have really deep conversation and discussion about the different topics. So now I'm going to go on to Sternberg Conference Center. So other than the time you spend in classroom, SCC, as we lovingly know Sternberg Conference Center, is where you spend really the kind of in-between time. And so on a Friday for WEMBA, you're typically spending your lunchtime in Sternberg Conference Center. You know, you would come in, if you're out this door and to the left, Huntsman, where we just were, is off to the left there. So we would come down this walk, come into Sternberg Conference Center, hang a left when we come in the store, head up those stairs, and our dining spaces on the second floor there. You can see this space in SEC really is like a hotel lobby, you know, very welcoming space. You come and drop your stuff, you check into your room for the weekend. You know, you have some other meeting rooms and kind of lecture halls in the back here. So sometimes if we had special speakers or events, we would have meet with them there. Have some elevators here that take you up to the upper floors where the guest rooms are, and we have a little breakout here. So this is what the rooms in SEC look like. You know, nice, simple space, not cluttered. Come in and drop your stuff, have a space to study, read if you need to, space to kind of relax, and you know, watch some TV at the end of the night. And then also in Sternberg Conference Center, you know, we have space to lounge, we have study rooms and other spaces where we spent a lot of time. So I think the last space that I'll take you all to on the tour is really going to be this quad. This is a space that's right outside of SCC. You can see nice, beautiful open space. Every now and then we would have you know, be able to come out here on a nice day. You can kind of see these umbrellas. This is space where you can sit and eat. So sometimes we would bring our lunch or our meals outside. This is Sternberg Conference Center here. And I have some pictures to show you all of some of the times that me and my classmates spent out there. Also, off to the left, it's not going to be a stop on our tour, but it's also a space where we spend a lot of our time, which is in the WEMBA office. And so that's where all the folks who keep the program running and who take such good care of us are located. Their offices are located in there. We have kind of coffee and snacks and other things. But you can see it creates a really intimate experience for us that's really unique to the WEMBA program, but also I think gives us that full campus experience. When you're in WEMBA as a student at Penn, you're able to get the full experience. You have access to the libraries and all of the kind of spaces, but also the resources and research materials. You're able to go to events and activities, so games and other student activities. And of course, you're, as I mentioned, in some ways right in the heart of Philadelphia. And so Walnut Street, which I showed you on the first stop of the tour, is also where you can just walk right into Rittenhouse Square or down into Center City. Very easy to get into the city, have a great meal, go to a concert, and enjoy your time in the city. So I am just quickly, before we end the tour, going to bring a little bit more life to some of the spaces I showed you through some of the photos from some of my classmates. So this is space right outside of the Sternberg Conference Center. These are all of my classmates throughout the program. The folks who run WEMBA for us always do great activities, meals. They try to mix it up for us. So this is a barbecue that we had. I think they recognize that as full-time folks who are working, we have little ones in our lives, we have family members, friends, and so they have family events out in these spaces for us. And then another space that you saw, and this is with some bodies in the room, as I mentioned, in our classroom. So this is our macroeconomics professor, Steve Myers. We very much loved him in his classes, learned a ton, and just, as I mentioned, spend a lot of time in these courses, really in deep conversation and being able to spend the time together. So I'm going to go ahead back to the slide deck and dive into some of the questions that you have. So let's see what we have here. So one question says, it sounds like you came from Jersey for the weekends. Was that overwhelming at all, or did you find it manageable? So I found it manageable. I will say where I live in Jersey made it much easier. As I mentioned, I'm about 10 to 12 minutes north driving from Trenton train station. Trenton train station is a really great hub here because SEPTA, which is the regional rail for Pennsylvania, its last stop in outside of the city is in Jersey. And so I didn't have to do transfers or anything like that. I could get on a train about an hour and a half before classes would start on a Friday morning and take regional rail actually down to Philadelphia for the weekend. We also had a lot of classmates coming in from farther north in New Jersey or in New York City, folks coming in from DC who would take Amtrak, many folks who were traveling same day. I had some work trips where I was down in DC right before class weekend and would hop on the 6 a.m. Amtrak from DC and be able to make it into Philly on time for class. So for me, that wasn't overwhelming. I'll also say, just on a personal note, I don't have small children. I think I have a lot of classmates who have families, who had small children and other loved ones they were caring for. So I think the additional responsibility of just sorting through, the Friday night that they weren't going to be home, or if they were traveling in from farther away. As I mentioned, I saw some folks in there from San Francisco, I see Detroit, from Dallas. So folks in particular who are flying in, sometimes it's not just one night away from home, it's both the Thursday night and the Friday night because you're flying in. That, depending on what the responsibilities are at home, sometimes it's a little bit more tricky to coordinate your travel also with what needs to happen at home. But it wasn't a huge burden for me. And that time on the train, which is time, like if I had an exam, I could do a little preparation. If we had a class where we were going to be going over case studies, I could kind of review what I had prepared for class. So I personally really liked the commute down. Are students authorized to bring their families for the weekend? So the accommodations that you have access to over the weekend is it's your accommodation there as a student. And so that sounds maybe like a workaround answer. So the more direct answer is WEMBA is incredibly accommodating. I have classmates, and I think particularly about my female classmates who had children in the program and who had young infants and wanted to be able to have their young children with them on the weekend, either for feeding or just for bonding, and didn't want to or weren't able to spend a night away from a very small child. They were able to have their child come down with them, and if they had a mother or mother-in-law or another loved one, be able to have them with them. And WEMBA is incredibly accommodating. One thing though I will say is WEMBA very much encourages its students to come down and really spend the time on campus. So we even had classmates who are from Philadelphia who would stay in accommodations over the weekend. A big part of the WEMBA experience is the time that you spend with your classmates in SEC, in the accommodations that you have, whether you're studying together, whether you're eating together, and really, as I mentioned, being able to almost compartmentalize in a way and kind of spend that time away from, what's going on professionally. And so I think, the direct answer is WEMBA can be accommodating for sure if there is a reason that on a more regular basis you might need to have your family with you. But I think would also encourage that you look at the time that you have in the program as a time to really come down as a student and bond with your classmates and be able to put 100% of your focus into what's happening on campus and what's happening in your classes. Can you comment on the biggest transformation you've noticed in yourself? Wow, that's a great one. I would say the biggest transformation in myself is just my sense of possibilities. I think because I had such a narrow background and focus in hard sciences, the realm of things that I thought might be possible for my career looked very different than how I think about that now. I went to Princeton undergraduate, and so being able to attend an Ivy institution undergrad really demonstrated to me the power of the types of networks that you have access to when you go to top tier schools. And I think Wharton just adds to that. As I mentioned, because I didn't have a background in business, and that's something that I think I was looking for in a program. It really gave me not only the content and the subject matter knowledge that I wanted from an MBA, but also the connections to classmates. I have classmates now, we have a group text, and anyone can say, hey, I'm looking for a framework or a process, a strategy process. Has anyone done this type of transformation or this type of marketing approach? And so, being able to lean into your classmates and have access to a network that really allows you to use them as a resource, help you see what's possible in your career, but also just open you up to new opportunities and new possibilities. I think that's one of the biggest transformations. I have a couple of questions about when people arrive, if people stay over Saturday nights. I'll just build on my response from earlier, which is, folks kind of figure out what works for them. I think for a lot of folks, particularly if they know they need to take Amtrak in or if they know they're going to be flying in, they tend to kind of purchase tickets for travel several weeks and months in advance just to help minimize costs. And then after, a term or two, you start to figure out what works for you. I know that as my schedule became more flexible toward my final terms in the program, I might drive down some weekends instead of taking the train. And that just allowed me flexibility where, if I didn't have a Saturday afternoon class, I could head home earlier with a little bit more ease. So, folks kind of do what works for them. The other thing I'll say is you build really strong relationships with your classmates. And so even for folks who might live a distance away, either on Amtrak or maybe flying, they would use that extra time sometimes on a Saturday night to hang out with classmates. We had classmates, again, as I mentioned, who live in Philadelphia, and sometimes friends would stay overnight in the city and do something together. So it's really all about what worked for your schedule. Let's see. I have a few more questions coming in. Sorry, just trying to. How many hours studying, and is the coursework very exhaustive along with the job? How many hours studying? So I think it really depends. For me, as I mentioned, because much of what we're learning, particularly in the MBA core, so for instance, accounting, microeconomics, corporate finance, those were all things that were honestly brand new to me. My husband is an engineer and has a background in supply chain operations. And so, like, something like that may be subject matter I could get help with operations, but a lot of the material is brand new for me. So I spent a good amount of time really hitting the books, really digging in, and really leaning on my classmates for some of our group projects or opportunities to have group study sessions because it was all brand new to me. Then you're going to have folks who work in corporate finance, who have degrees in economics, who are already doing operations in their day-to-day work. And for a lot of my classmates, what that meant was, depending on what their course load was for a particular term, it might be a light term or a heavy term for them in terms of coursework. So it does really depend on your background and kind of what subjects are going to be new for you, and what your comfort is or experience is. I will say that what I love about WEMBA in particular is, even though the core curriculum in your first year looks very similar to what the core would be for a traditional MBA program, the professors really teach to our level. And so, the folks in WEMBA, I would say, are anywhere between, let's say, 27, and I had classmates who were well into their 50s, folks with extensive work experience. And so something I really enjoyed about the classes and the coursework was, it wasn't just preparing in terms of being able to memorize formulas or be able to figure out the right answer to, what might be on a quiz or on, an exam. It was really preparing yourself to dig into conversation about how to apply these concepts and principles in your day-to-day work. And a lot of how the professors even asked us to apply is, they would look at the roster and say, okay, we're going to dig into X topic today. I see such and such works in energy. Can you bring an example maybe from work? And so really being able to leverage the fact that we had such deep expertise in our classmates and in our class was something that made it such that the preparation is intense, but is incredibly rewarding. I would say, yes, it is a lot to juggle on top of work. We all like to say to each other, all of us are kind of, full-time employees, full-time students, full-time partners for some of us, full-time parents, and we play in a range of different roles. And once you get into WEMBA, you realize there's never going to be a week, a day, a month where you're doing any of those 100% well. But that's just kind of the magic of the experience. It's the hardest thing and the most rewarding thing I think many of us have done. And it allows you to push yourself in ways that I think you really realize what you're fully capable of. Um, so I have a few questions here about some wow moments from the program. I like that question. Um, I think some of my wow moments from the program were really around some of the additional activities that we get access to, just being Wharton students. So as a part of all the WEMBA programs to date, you have your Global Business Week, and that was one of the highlights of my time in Wharton. We had in my class the selection of Argentina, Japan, Europe, kind of a 2 destination stop in Europe. And I chose Argentina. I had never been to South America. And it was just like one of the most memorable experiences of my life. For many of us, in addition to Global Business Week, we also took advantage of global modular courses, which are available to take for credit to all Wharton students. And those were amazing experiences. So I spent time in Israel, I spent time in London, and the thing that's really magical is you're not only building on what you're learning in the core curriculum in the time that you spend in those modular courses, but you're also learning in context. So you're really learning about the differences of those different topics and how they apply within a particular global context or within particular industries. And those are some of the better moments. I know we're at the top of our time, so just as a final treat, I wanted to share, let's see if I can pull it up easily here. I wanted to share, when you talk about wow moments, I'm just gonna scroll through. Some of these are hard to see, but these are some of our wow moments. This is at one of our favorite Mexican restaurants, walking distance from campus. This is in our innovation class where we were able to do Lego figures. We have all of these memories from our time in the program, and this is a Google Drive that one of our classmates pulled together so we can all add photos. But these are some of the experiences that we were able to have both internationally and at our time on campus. And so I wish you all the best in your process of figuring out what program is right for you, and just encourage you that if you have questions, reach out to the MBA exec, my app at wharton.upenn.edu. And I think that's the end of my time here. So thank you.